Astrology, done well, cannot leave the human being behind. So many astrologers relate the person to the horoscope. If we relate the horoscope to the individual and how that individual is dealing with his or her reality, we have magic. Creative management of these basics free us to do our best. The moon is the reigning need of the entire life system. You're anticipating how a person will behave in order to fulfill that reigning need. The horoscope is showing you social patterns of development, illuminated in terms of a zodiacal sign. This brings the horoscope literally and figuratively to life. Oh, this is so important. It really and truly is. So this astrological study process really is an enrichment for us, the astrologer. The richness of you as an astrologer grows, grows, and grows the more you do this. Hello again. Isn't it interesting that the moon so close to the earth and the sun so far from the earth are the same size? It seems that that's telling us something. Isn't it interesting that the moon seems ensnared by the earth as a private body, perhaps bringing reflections from the sun, especially to us on earth? It's our moon, after all. And if you ponder these things, you realize that the moon going so swiftly daily is eager for a message to be communicated. And that message, as we explored initially in DVD 1, is what I call the reigning need, R-E-I-G-N-I-N-G, the reigning need. It's what makes things happen. And a good way to remember this is when you've got to go, you got to go. Simple as that. There's a pressure that's built up in the system in many different ways that propels us to take action. Psychologists call it the need press. There's a pressure that pushes us to fulfill needs. Now, this brings the horoscope literally and figuratively to life. There's no doubt about it. There's not much new to learn. If you know all the descriptions of the moon in the signs, just add the word need. And as soon as you add that word need, you're anticipating behavior. Isn't that wonderful? You're anticipating how a person will behave in order to fulfill that reigning need. And just as the sun's light goes throughout the entire system of planets to one degree or another, so the reigning need goes throughout all behaviors to fulfill parts here and there to one degree or another. We're going to explore that today, and it really will bring symbolisms to life. And they're not just platitudes that we're talking about today. Rather, we're talking about effective insights that help life and relationships along. To fulfill needs, we need other people. I can't clap with one hand. I need to make a relationship with that hand. I need you, you need me. So let's take a look at the fire family, the air family, the water family, the earth family. For moon position only, and see how so much else is brought in to serve the process of need fulfillment. Now, with the moon in Aries, just starting with the cardinal sign of the fire family, the all-pervasive need is to be numero uno, to be number one. In everything one does, that is the press of that need, to be important. Now, of course, to be effective, this front-running position requires grace. It can get out of hand all too easily. You can recall the times in your life when you were heavy-handed with ego energies and invited conspicuous difficulties. Perfectly normal. The moon in Aries person needs to think about how to be prominent without ruffling feathers. Think about that. In that way, you can fulfill these extraordinarily bright energies best. I love the example of Celine Dion. What a fabulous singer. Emerging with the moon in Aries, out of a family of 12 children, I believe, to become a number one figure in the world. Look at Jim Jones of Jonestown. He made himself a number one figure in a tragic way. He had the moon in Aries, of course. Look at Jackie Kennedy Onassis with the moon in Aries. Look at Bill Gates. Being number one is terribly important to these example names I've just shared with you. But everybody with the moon in Aries, using whatever sun energy one has, depending on its sign, is going to propel themselves to fulfill the number one self-image. If the sun is in Pisces, it will be done with poetical input and grace, perhaps, and the battle won't be too difficult to rise above the masses. But if the sun is in Scorpio, for example, with that driving, power, correct, controlling energy, that moon in Aries is going to have tremendous ramifications. It's like boxing without the gloves. Now, it's perfectly reasonable to anticipate that that need fulfillment process is problematic. And if it's problematic, we have to know where the problems come. I always like to say, if somebody walks into your office who has 17 planets in Aries, and they're totally introverted and sit down and hide their face in their hands when they talk to you, this is everything but being numero uno. There's a problem there. There's nothing wrong with astrology. There's nothing wrong with you, the astrologer, or what you know. There's a problem. There's a short circuit. In development, the ego thrust is not supported somehow. And so it pulls back in frustration. Now, I can give you 3 considerations to find that short circuit, to discuss it with your client, to take away the fences and allow, in this case, ego bloom energy to be used effectively and gracefully. These 3 concerns are written right here. First of all, parental support. Was there parental support for the person? And we see that through Saturn retrograde relationships, the nodal axis possible, the ruler of the 10th house, the ruler of the 4th house, perhaps Pluto relationships with the sun, Pluto relationships with the moon. In DVD number 1, we talked about Saturn retrograde phenomenology, a problematic relationship with the father, usually one who is not there or is very passive, and therefore not giving the support in a balance with the mother that society recommends. We found that a planet within 2 degrees orb of a strong aspect with the nodal axis is going to suggest a very powerful mother issue. And that probably short circuits, takes away support from the press of fulfillment of the moon in Aries or any other sign. In DVD number 3, we're talking in great depth about rulerships, but I'll give you a sneak preview. Anytime in this horoscope that you're studying, you see the ruler of the 10th under high developmental tension, that can be a short circuit from one of the parents, usually the father. Similarly with the 4th house, usually with the mother. We studied in the first DVD, Pluto relationship with the sun in hard aspect suggests a blanket over the hand grenade, if you will. It's a suppression. And we found that with the moon, the Pluto hard aspect is going to bring in mother issues of great strength. So parental support takes into considerations all those items. This can affect the process of need fulfillment. The second concern is hemisphere emphasis. Hemisphere emphasis tells us a great deal as well. We studied in DVD 1 those hemisphere emphases and concomitant defense mechanisms. There are other house tensions in development as well, and we see that through the condition of the rulers of these houses. The second, self-worth. The 11th, if the ruler of the 11th is under high developmental tension, there's a feeling of not being lovable. Where did that come from? 9, maybe your education was interrupted. That's a no-no in our society. It stultifies growth and acceptance by society. 3, might be a problematic condition of the ruler of the third house, suggesting sibling rivalry. And all of this is carried over, of course, into the patterns of our relationships with others. Sounds like a whole lot, doesn't it? But your mind learns to take care of these things so swiftly when there's practice and understanding and confidence. So always settle these 3 analytical questions: parental support, hemisphere emphasis, other tensions in house activity development. That's the stage upon which the press for moon need fulfillment occurs. And when the moon is in Leo, one deeply needs recognition, appreciation, and honor. Having what you do be seen as a shining and important endeavor. Applause is essential. With the moon in Leo position, one must be careful not to take up too much of the spotlight. If you share it magnanimously, your royal complex will bloom. Isn't it interesting that the country of Israel, the modern state of Israel, was born with the moon in Leo? Just think about that. Queen Latifah, appropriately named. She's got a queen complex, she deserves it. And she's got the moon in Leo. I often say about me that I have a king complex, and I have the moon in Leo. All these are very powerful considerations. They sound simple, but they open the door to dynamic appreciation of an individual in the process of development. And always ask about these 3 variables. With the moon in Sagittarius, so simple. You desperately need to have your opinions respected and listened to above all else. This moon position can also suggest a physical drive, working out in the gym, exploring the outdoors, exploring sport, because this helps discharge the great energies and give strength and drama to the pronouncements. Now, the role of education is supremely important when the moon is in Sagittarius, because you have to have the credentials in order to be credible. If you have all this to say, and you are not credentialized, you're going to have difficulty getting fulfilled. Look how Larry King, with the moon in Sagittarius, collects the authority of educated people by interviewing them, by associating himself with people of power. Look at Donald Trump. My goodness, what an opinionated man. But boy, does he make sense. It was very interesting that I bumped into him in New York City, right outside the New York Athletic Club. On a Sunday morning, I was out for a walk, and he came bursting out of the New York Athletic Club. Boom, we sort of bumped into each other, and he looked at me and smiled because he saw that I recognized who he was. But he has this very powerful moon in Sagittarius. And he was working it out. Look at Billy Graham, Martha Stewart, Oprah Winfrey. One can go on and on and on. These people have got their opinions out there in the world, and they are fulfilled. Put them in a room with no windows, dealing with numbers, they're going to have a great difficulty feeling good about themselves. And again, with the moon in Sagittarius, these three variables have to be tested. Sometimes very, very hard for parents to allow their children to have independent opinions, to follow their curiosity into channels that will help them bloom. Now the air family, with the moon in Libra, that person needs so much to be liked. Sounds so simple, doesn't it? To be seen as fair, attractive, popular. Every relationship is really a mirror of how wonderful they are. There's nothing wrong with that, except when too much of the social preening creates a self-centeredness. The best thing you could say to someone with the moon in Libra having a bit of difficulty is share the wonderful things you are fairly. Then everyone will agree with you. Look at Sylvester Stallone. I love to watch someone interviewing him. You can see the moon in Libra working beautifully. Julia Child was a joy. George W. Bush sailed through life as a good old boy. That's another level of moon in Libra. And remember those three analytical questions. They are the beginning of a dynamic analysis. When we have the moon in Aquarius, the reigning need for that person's development is to be socially significant, usually through helping others, to be individualistic and special in group efforts. Because this way, people will feel gratitude to the moon in Aquarius. And the moon in Aquarius will collect ego support. And in our times now, these energies are at a premium. They really are. So I would say to my client who is a short circuit with the moon in Aquarius, share your work and vision for a better world, no matter how big the picture is. You can have a very good discussion about that with someone with the moon in Aquarius, I assure you. Muhammad Ali, Fidel Castro, the nationalistic urban, if I may, poet Carl Sandburg, and of course, when there's a short circuit, the analytical questions, the three that I'm drilling into you, if you will, always apply. If your moon is in Gemini, the reigning need is to be regarded as informed, articulate, entertaining, and above all, interesting. Brightness and cleverness must be in the foreground, in all relationships. There can be a nervous intensity here that can lead to too much variety and concomitant indecision. So think how you can anchor all those ideas and expressive thoughts to really get something done. Barbara Walters is a perfect example of quite a fulfilled moon in Gemini. Isn't it interesting that the United Nations organization came into being with the moon in Gemini? Just think of all of those voices, informed, articulate, important, speaking all at once, and you get a feel of the moon in Gemini going wild. President Barack Obama has the moon in Gemini. The great comedian that we've all loved so much, Victor Borge, tells you the whole story. And of course, the three guiding questions must be on your mind when you talk to someone with the moon in Gemini. Now let me show you a few horoscopes here, and then we'll come back to these discussions. Now here is Celine Dion's horoscope. Notice this group right here at the midheaven. The moon is in Aries indeed, and so is the sun. So you feel immediately a tremendous driving energy. The hemisphere emphasis is very powerful. It is in the south. She is going to be victimizable by the events of life, pushed into the stream of things, and hopefully she can keep her ego head up, because there are considerations along the lines that I've been advising you with the list shown to you many times now. We're going to look at this group right here, other house tensions in development. Now, Venus is opposed by Pluto. This is a tension. Venus is the ruler of the 11th. Celine Dion, lost in that huge family, did not really feel that she was lovable. I can tell you that for sure. Notice that Saturn is conjunct the sun. You'd have to talk about it because the sun rules the ascendant and the second house. So there's an identity development anxiety. There's a self-worth anxiety. But yes, Jupiter here in Leo is trine to the moon, and that is supportive. So this is how you're building a synthesis right away. Leaving the jargon out, you have a beautiful set of sentences. The threat of being lost with such an ego drive to be numero uno, carried with it an anxiety about being lovable and poor self-worth image. I just said all of that. This is Jim Jones' horoscope. Here's the moon in Aries on the nodal axis. You have to talk about the mother issues there because the father issues are wrapped up with Saturn retrograde phenomenology. And notice how Saturn is square to Venus. And Venus is the ruler of the 10th. So we have an echo through that rulership of the Saturn retrograde phenomenology. And it's very important because this is the final dispositor, Saturn in its own sign. And there's so much more. But you can see these things immediately. Look at Tom Hanks. Lovable Tom Hanks. Notice the adjective I used, lovable. Here he is, soft Cancer energies. Notice the reigning need is to be appreciated and honored. If he's not the hero in his home, he will be very frustrated. So he earns it with grace because the anxiety, fear of not being loved is enormous. See, the moon is the ruler of the 11th house, which we're going to see in great detail in DVD 3, is the need for love. This area right here. And notice that that moon is peregrine, not making a Ptolemaic aspect, and we discussed that on DVD 1. There's an eccentric way about Tom Hanks that makes him pursue a leonine profession like acting. It's all very clear, isn't it? Notice how Mercury itself is also peregrine, not making a Ptolemaic aspect. And yet all of this is acceptable to the public because it's emotionally based. It has a softness to it. Notice how the Mars, the need to apply energy, is gentilized, if I may create a word, by Mars being in Pisces. Isn't that lovely? Okay, I can go on and on and on, but I'm trying to nurse you into synthesis that is magical. Here is the state of Israel. Look at that cluster, Saturn, Pluto, and the moon, and Leo in the 10th. And the moon is peregrine, see? Does not make a Ptolemaic aspect in the horoscope. Which means the world doesn't quite understand them, and they don't quite understand the world. May need to be appreciated enormously, just enormously. The great anxiety of not being loved is, or respected, is shown by Mars here, square to the Sun. And the Sun rules the 11th. This is Queen Latifah's horoscope. There's your moon and her moon in Leo. And it's squared by Mars and Saturn. It's not all been clear sailing, I assure you. And one would have to start to talk about this. Now I want to introduce you to something that is very, very important. This is an aspect called the quindicile. Almost every horoscope has two or more. It's 165 degrees, which is 15 degrees less than an opposition. It looks like an opposition. Look at the nodal axis here and Pluto. Looks like an opposition, but it's exactly 15 degrees past it. 15 and 11 is 26. Pluto is at 26 Virgo, opposite the nodal axis that begins in Pisces. Now, this is a kind of obsession. It's high tension. It really and truly is a locomotive pulling a long train. And in this relationship, her life perspective is tied to public acceptance. And along the line, a lot of relationship problems, because Pluto rules the seventh. Much more here, but there it is. There's also a maternal reference here, because the nodal axis, if it's within, if a planet is relating to the nodal axis by about 2 degrees or no more, 2.5 max, the maternal influence will be enormous. And we have that case here. Okay? And there's more. I show the quindicile with a dotted line, and there'll be several dotted lines in the cases ahead. Here's my horoscope. Here's my moon in the communications third house, in Leo, dramatic. It's in full awareness through this opposition of Venus in Aquarius. Perhaps doing good works with other people in my relationships. It's clear as a bell, isn't it? Here's Oprah Winfrey with the outstanding moon in Sagittarius. Her whole drive in her life has been to get her opinions respected, listened to. And boy, has she done it with a dynasty. And that moon is peregrine, so it is going to just command the entire horoscope and dominate her life. Here's George W. Bush. Here's his moon in Libra with Jupiter. I'm sure he's a very popular man to all the people who come close to him, for sure. We have a Saturn peregrine. Notice that rules Capricorn on the 6th, which is civil service, helping other people. Here's Mars in Virgo, also peregrine. That's what that oval means. I do it like that so that I can see it instantly, and I don't have to keep measuring over and over again. This Mars factor is important because it rules the paternal midheaven. And might that be the situation of defensiveness? The fact that his father was president and very popular as well. Here is Muhammad Ali. Notice that the moon is in Aquarius, helping other people. He needs to. He has done an enormous amount of work in social services. Notice its position in the 6th house. And he's had to have a lot of defenses in his life. Notice this grand trine in Earth. Among the sun Uranus, and Neptune. And as we studied in DVD 1, this is a closed circuit of practical self-sufficiency. He made his way from a very poor beginning in Louisville, Kentucky, to being perhaps the most popularly well-known human being in the world at one time. Here is Barbara Walters with the moon in Gemini, augmented by this conjunction with Jupiter, supported by Mars in Libra, nice little trine there, and a peregrine sun in Libra on the ascendant. If this is not a public, pleasing, informed person, I don't know what it is, but it's completely absorbed with charm, information, and delight. I remember years ago, when Barbara Walters was on the Today Show, I was interviewed on the NBC Morning Today Show nationally, and I got to meet her before the show, preparing our talk, and on camera. And I must say, it was a magnetic experience. And whenever I see someone with strong Libra energy in the horoscope and the moon in Gemini, I remember all of that, and I have that feeling. And this is how astrologers accumulate experience. And there's one more thing I want to point out here before we go back to our narrative, is that this sun is in a cardinal sign within 2 degrees. That's called the Aries point. Even though it is not in Aries, Aries point reference calls attention to 0 Cancer, 0 Libra, 0 Capricorn, or 0 Aries. And when a planet is positioned there, we find that it comes forward, it comes out into the world, it is obvious. Let's show you another one here. This is my horoscope. If you look at my ascendant, you will see a perfect Aries point. What comes out from this to the world is Cancerian emotion and feeling and caring for others. And it's echoed by the fact that the Sun and Jupiter are pretty splendid there in the 7th house. And that is echoed by the Venus in Aquarius, the helper. Oppose the moon in Leo. I do it dramatically and you better appreciate me. That's the attitude. Clear? I think we have one more here. This is Barack Obama, perfectly clear. Notice the dotted line here. We have a quindicile, which my machine shows me on the aspect grid. 165-degree aspect with a 2.5-degree orb. And that's Saturn, retrograde, we know that, the phenomenology of that, is in quindicile with the Sun in Leo. This is, I am going to make it and be proud of it, and I'm going to do it with my brain and information, my communication skills. Notice the moon in Gemini. I need to do that. I need to be popular. I need to be heard. And isn't it fascinating that that is Pluto square to the moon, which we know is in the influence of the mother. And isn't it interesting that the nodal axis is exactly square to the midheaven as well. So we immediately have a kind of king complex energy that was not really supported at all by the father figure in the early home. It was out of the picture early. So the mother took over. And the perspectives dreamed about for her son became the support mechanism for his rise to complete fulfillment. All right, now let's do the water family and the earth family. If your moon is in Cancer, the reigning need is for emotional security. Everybody will say, well, moon in Cancer, emotional security. I'm advising your mind to say the need for emotional security so that you can anticipate behavior. The need is to feel comfortable, to feel safe. Now just think about how much you would gladly give up in your life in order to have that kind of security. It's very important to who you are when you have the moon in Cancer. Think about the emotional anxieties you may have carried forward from your family life. How can you feel secure with emotions now as an adult with minimum anxiety? It's very easy for our three concerns to short circuit emotional drive, the drive for emotional security. Very easy. Our emotions are open doors for frustration and upset. Did the parents recognize the ego's need for security? Did they give support? How efficient are achievement behaviors being managed? How do the house tensions of self-worth and receiving love and betterment through education, sharing in relationships, how do they fit into the developmental picture? You can have a teddy bear like Walter Cronkite, uncle to the nation. And he had the moon in Cancer. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the nurse who brought about a revolution in the management of death concerns in our medical system. Moon in Cancer. Now, if the moon is in Scorpio, gee, maybe we ought to skip that one. Anyhow, the moon in Scorpio has a reigning need to be in control. There's no doubt about it, to be regarded as deep, significant, reliable, self-sufficient, and above all, right. This is a lot of drive and power. Very hard for a woman with the moon in Scorpio in our society. And sometimes it is difficult for others to accept and allow. So if someone is having a real problem with this set of behaviors, we have to make sure that the goals for control are good. And then we have to ever be aware of how to proceed kindly. There's so much power here. It demands grace. And in this way, the power will have a softer edge, but not lose any of its effectiveness. Nancy Pelosi has the moon in Scorpio. And she's running things there in Washington. Listen to her tact when she's grilled and put on the spot. She is consciously trying to manage power with some grace. Whoopi Goldberg, what a formidable mind. And you feel it. Phil Donahue, if you can remember him as a TV show host and debate moderator. And don't forget those 3 analytical questions to guide your thinking. Now, if the moon is in Pisces, the reigning needs to be respected for sensitivity, for your ideals, impressions, your work with the intangible. There needs to be much aesthetic here. But if things get too dreamy, too impractical, it's easy to absorb sadness and loneliness as well. And oh my, it's really easy to be martyr to a cause, isn't it? So the person with the moon in Pisces has to use the sensitivity to acknowledge a happy state of caring, of what is lovely. Look at Michael Jackson. The moon in Pisces personified. Martin Luther King, I have a dream. That's Pisces. Elvis Presley. And in fiction, Don Quixote, Don Quixote, the impossible dream. Fascinating, isn't it? How one planet, how the moon has messengered to the earth from the sun, illuminated in terms of a zodiacal sign, signifies a reigning need complex that stimulates and energizes all our behavioral faculties. In the Earth family, things change. Things change to drier, harder, task-oriented, purposeful colors. If the moon is in Capricorn, the need is strong to make things happen, to push the administration of life. And of course, this entails leadership talents and strengths. The more, the merrier. People will respond if you're clear and fair with your messages. That moon in Capricorn person must remember not to overdo these energies. Even a medium amount of that kind of behavior is usually enough. Adolf Hitler, moon in Capricorn. Bobby Kennedy. And what do we feel about Sarah Palin with the moon in Capricorn? She got into trouble by expressing all of that without the depth of backup. And I can imagine that the last year and a half or so, she has been running around to build fortification underneath the structure she's aiming for. The moon in Taurus, for me personally, this is the most difficult position to work with. The reigning need within the moon in Taurus personality is to keep things as they are, or to structure them ideally the way they should be. Organization is extremely important. There's a curious resistance to change, which is not always advantageous for growth. Now, the reason there is this anxiety about change is because it invites transient insecurity. If I give up my organization and my structure to change it, I'm vulnerable. My defenses are gone. My practical positioning in life is threatened. I think the antidote for anxieties like this are to build respect for dynamic development, and worry less about those transient insecurities. This way, organization actually helps with development, doesn't keep it stagnant. Jerry Falwell. And what's going through my mind right now is the biblical injunction to Peter to, "You are my rock, and on this rock build my church." Jimmy Hoffa, talk about organization and support, and power. Pope John Paul II. Everything was so ideally kept. There wasn't much growth and development. The changes that people were banging for in the Catholic Church did not come to pass. Fascinating, isn't it? If your reigning need is symbolized by the moon in Virgo, we can expect a drive to be correct, a mission to be correct, to understand and express things accurately. There's a sense of discrimination and exactness that can be extraordinarily efficient, but appear cold and dry to others. Intensity can be a bit off-putting. So the wise thing to do is to take the details and warm them up. Make them less rigid. Season them with some rich emotion. I'd like to say that to Raquel Welch. Every moon in Virgo person needs a bit of my Cancer Aries point ascendant to spill over upon them, if you know what I mean. Look at Dustin Hoffman. For so many years, it seemed that he resisted feeling the feelings of others. He could portray them, but there was a kind of aloofness, a hermit-like separation. Rachel Ray on television. If you're a cook and you like to watch cooking shows, you certainly know her. And look how she works so hard in what she says, how she says it, and how she gathers those groceries to bring to her kitchen table to be homey, to be emotional. References to her dog and to her husband and things like that. This is a conscious way of fighting a tremendous Virgo drive. And I will show you her horoscope in a moment. You'll see what I mean. Jodie Foster. Robert Redford. And you didn't forget those 3 analytical questions, did you? They can't be shown more importantly and frequently to you. Now, I'd like to show you some more charts, and that's how we learn. This is Walter Cronkite's horoscope, and I'm showing it to you not just because he has the moon in Cancer and we discussed the teddy bear persona, but how within all of that emotional warmth, how personal power can emerge. This tells us that Pluto is peregrine. That Pluto makes no Ptolemaic aspect in the horoscope, but it rules the ascendant, and it's trine to the ascendant. And Pluto is the projection of personal power into personal perspectives that are up for grabs. Anything you want. And notice how the Mars in Sagittarius, and we talked about this on DVD 1, opinionation, a lot to say about the world. Here is Whoopi Goldberg's horoscope, with both the Sun and the Moon in Scorpio with Saturn involved. This is very powerful. The need for her to be accepted is gigantic. Notice how Pluto squares this. Both fixed signs. Remember our marvelous drawing that told us how to read aspects quickly? Notice that Pluto's in a fixed sign, Saturn's in a fixed sign. They're both squares with a 5-degree orb. Pow. Now I want to also introduce to you, in our new way of studying, the quintile. The quintile measurement is 72 degrees. It's a sextile plus 12 degrees. I have them marked here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 quintiles. This is usually a measure of creativity. Doesn't matter where the quintile is, I have found. Doesn't matter what two bodies are or points are involved. It's just that kind of energy. When you have a lot of this, you have to ask your client, what is your creative outlet? I would say 3 or more quintiles, you have to ask that question, because you're going to get a very important answer. If you were to ask a banker, what is his creative outlet? He says, well, I don't have one. Change the question and say, what was it? And you're going to hear a great story of how it was not supported early on by his parents. And then the saga unfolds. Fascinating, it really is. Whoopi Goldberg was living on the streets at one point, was discovered, made the color purple. The rest is history with her incredible talents. Here's Nancy Pelosi in a rectification by astrologer Lauren Delsack. Notice that this moon is in Scorpio, and it's peregrine. It is quindicile with Mars. Talk about obsession with power. That's intensification galore. And that Mars is also quindicile to the midheaven. And for advanced students, that's giving us a midpoint picture of Mars equals moon midheaven. Enormous energy projected into her work for the honor it will bring her. Boom! Sun is in Aries. Jupiter, the hope for reward in the ego sign of Aries. Notice how that Jupiter is peregrine as well. This is a formidable, formidable horoscope for a formidable, formidable lady. Here is Michael Jackson's horoscope. Notice the moon is in such a gentle position here in Pisces. It's squared to Saturn. You can feel the buildup of difficulty, probably with the father, because we see the moon quindicile to Pluto, which is an enormous mother influence. And all of his work with children to excess, it seems to me, so society has said, we will see with Mercury squared by Mars, Mercury conjunct this Pluto, ruling the 5th, Venus squared by Mars, conjoined with Uranus, ruling the 5th as well. He's mother to these children. All overcompensatory for a northern hemisphere emphasis and not having a childhood of his own. His words. For advanced students, we can see that Pluto is Oriental, which certainly helped propel him into world stardom. Fascinating. We think this is Martin Luther King's horoscope, but whether the time is exactly right or not is not important. I just wanted to point out a horoscope with 1, 2, 3 peregrine planets. Mercury, peregrine, in Aquarius, helping other people, ruler of the 6th, social services. Venus, peregrine, gentle, co-ruler of the sixth, social services. Moon is in Pisces, dealing with the intangible. I want to help. I have a dream. Here's Bobby Kennedy. Totally different feel. Moon in Capricorn. A need to get things done. On the job. Pluto, Quindicile, to the moon. Obsessed with this. 1, 2, 3, 4 quintiles. Formidable talent. Moon, Quindicile, node. Excuse me, moon opposed node. It was Quindicile Pluto, solid line, opposition, on the nodal axis, mother. The influence of Rose Kennedy on Bobby Kennedy was enormous. Recall Prince Charles's horoscope with the moon also on the nodal axis. We believe this is Sarah Palin's horoscope, done again, a rectification by the skilled astrologer Lauren Delsac. Notice how the moon here is in Capricorn, getting things done, with Mercury. The sun is under tremendous tension here in Aquarius. What a group, huh? Sun, Mars, Saturn, with the sun ruling the social services sixth. Notice that Jupiter rules the midheaven, Sagittarius, and is peregrine. Sarah Palin identifies who she is through the work she does. Jerry Falwell, very powerful here. The sun in Leo, what a showman he was. The moon in Taurus, organization, structure, fundamentalism. Notice how the moon is with Mercury, square. They're both fixed signs. Boom, 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 boom. See that? Chuk, chuk, you know that's a square. I showed you that beautiful diagram in DVD 1. There it is again. These are both fixed signs. They're within orb. That's a square. Anytime the moon is tightly involved with Mercury, you're going to have a great talker. And so this person has to learn how to talk with that great talent to help fulfill a reigning need. And isn't it interesting that we find this Mercury factor in the ninth with the moon ruling the ninth? And Jerry Falwell founded a university. So did another evangelistic great talker named Oral Roberts. Founded a university, Oral Roberts University in Oklahoma. Simple, gigantic observations. Many more details. But if you start large, it's easier to go deep. Here's Jimmy Hoffa. Boy, he had a chip on his shoulder, didn't he? Look at that structural need. The organizational, humanistic forming of all the labor unions. Uranus is the final dispositor in its own sign, Aquarius, which is helping other people, and it's peregrine. So on another level, we're seeing everything we've learned fulfilled in neon lights. Here's John Paul II. Notice the Venus, Mercury. Remember we talked on DVD 1 about idealism and idealization, especially when Mercury is with Venus or the Sun, or Sun is with Venus, or all three are together, especially if they're in touch with Jupiter and Neptune, the spiritual comes into play. It is perfectly clear. The structure, the church rules. Notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quintiles. John Paul was a musician, an actor, an athlete, many, many talents. Here is Dustin Hoffman. See this? Neptune, Moon, and Mercury is just brought right in, I'm sure. All in Virgo. What this is saying is perfectionism, the need to be right and exact. No doubt about it. There is an idealized perfectionism here. And this is why Dustin Hoffman is so famous for taking 40 shots of the same scene, 40 takes of the same scene, over and over and over again. People put up with it because they know he's right in the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quintiles. Now you could be a terribly creative person without any quintiles in your horoscope. But I'm just pointing out that when you have so many, it has to come up. And he has a lot to say. He's always for the underdog. He stayed away from Academy Award performances early on in his career because he was so withdrawn, so shy, stuttering, short, all of those things. But he had so much to say. He would accept an award for the American Indian, for example, for the underdog. Oh, so much. And this is the kind of conversational depth you can open up when you're able to talk clearly about, in this case, dynamic solar energy in Leo, for the public, reflected upon the moon for idealistic correctness. And here's Rachel Ray, our last chart on this DVD. Look at that. I can hear you gasping. With the sun peregrine in the midst of it all. This is a rectification by astrologer Dean Bensix. But my goodness, we don't have to worry about details like that when we see all of this need to be right. How does she moisten it? How does she bring emotion to it? On this DVD, we have used the word peregrine often. We studied it intensely on DVD 1. It comes from the Latin word pilgrim, wandering, not in touch with anything. Astrologically, it suggests not having a Ptolemaic aspect, conjunction, sextile, square, trine, or opposition. when it's not aspected this way, the peregrine planet tends to be highly emphasized in life behavior. And that's good, because that's the way the peregrine planet is going to prove its significance, speaking symbolically, of course. But I don't want to hear anything about a peregrine astrologer. I want the astrologer to know where he or she is. Because in the consultation with your client, you're dominating. You have to be very careful not to be a force as much as a mirror. It's like a candle in front of a mirror. After a while, you lose the source of light. Now, I want to give you a few questions for all the substance we have talked about in this DVD. Just sit with these, ponder them, and they will bring to life all your conversation in consultations. When the moon is in Aries, it would be so nice to establish your importance here. How can we do that? With the moon in Leo, you could say symbolically, your leadership is important here. How can you and the others you're with do more on these issues? This excuses the power and assimilates it. It invites the moon in Leo to work with others. The moon in Sagittarius, listen to this question. Does everyone know your opinions about this matter? You really do know. They've got to know too. When the moon is in Cancer, let's identify the emotional values of this situation. Then we will be closer to a reliable strategy. And I know you can work with that. The key word there is reliable. When the moon is in Scorpio, in order for you to gain more control in this situation, what is necessary? Let's discuss that. And how can you get it? When the moon is in Pisces, with your sensitivity about all these issues, how can we mix the practical with the ideal? And that way we can really be objective. When the moon is in Gemini, I like to say sometimes, or at least capture this spirit in my discussion, I know you're thinking about all of this full time. How can you show these other people how much you know about the situation? You see how these remarks, these thoughts, these ideas really touch the fundamental behaviors to fulfill the need symbolized in a reigning dimension by the moon. When the moon's in Libra, I love to smile and say, how can you shine in this situation? Tell me. How can we make your position more attractive to more people? Oh, gosh. In Aquarius, everybody knows you care. So what's the magical idea that can take things further? When the moon is in Virgo, give this thought a try. You surely want to be on top of the details here. So tell me, what's your grasp of it all? Where are people going wrong? And what can be done about it? In other words, you're giving the moon in Virgo an audience to criticize that is not going to be dangerous. You're on the side of your client, remember. When the moon is in Taurus, we really need your organizational imprint on this situation to make it what it should be. How can we build that? Tell me. And finally, with the moon in Capricorn, you probably know best how this should proceed. What can you do concretely to make it happen? Really important, isn't it? The moon says so much to us every day. It whirls around us, as I've said, a private messenger from the sun. Refine the moon's position. Take care to ward off, put away, resolve with understanding the potential short circuits involved in development. The richness of you as an astrologer grows, grows, and grows the more you do this. We meet again on DVD 3. Thank you.